in 1982 at Denver's CBS station KMGH. I produced a TV documentary about astronaut training. One of my film locations was Ball Aerospace near Boulder. There, I met a ring laser physicist from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base who knew about my investigations of animal mutilations linked to an alien intelligence that interacted with Earth. To my surprise, he said that he knew there were ETs that could bend space and time point to point. Hundreds, thousands of light years could be traveled rapidly, and time itself could be traveled forward and backward. Now, in September 2016, comes an ebook on Amazon.com called Disclosure, The Chronicles of John Titor II. John Titor says there was a counterintelligence imposter in 2000 to 2001 on the Art Bell program, who was deliberately trying to discredit the real U.S. Air Force Area 51 John Titor time traveler, the man who will be talking with us today. But like trying to walk in a hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor, trying to prove what is true and what is not true is very difficult, and most of what you will hear tonight will seem impossible. The ebook is divided into different years and locations in which John Titor says he traveled during his United States Air Force work as, quote, commander of the 177th Time Travel Division, close quote, based at Area 51, Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. Beginning in 1978, John Titor writes that his first practice runs were to the Moon and Mars. The time travel devices he calls TR-3Bs. They are triangular aircraft with a large round light at each vertex. The trick to time travel, he told me, is being able to exceed the speed of light. Physicist Albert Einstein would argue that is not possible because at the speed of light, mass becomes infinite. However, John Titor says, when you pass 186,000 miles a second, you can dial in space-time coordinates that can be matched in resonance by the TR-3Bs. The TR-3B triangle machines were built with the help of non-humans known as Greys, according to Titor. On pages 42 and 59 of the ebook, there are what are described as photos of a triangular TR-3B flying in Earth's sky. It looks like the triangle seen and photographed over Belgium from 1989 to 1990. One of those photos is at the front of the UK Condign report that John and I have discussed so much on previous Phenomenon radio broadcasts. John Titor says that TR-3Bs have, quote, magnetic field disruptors, close quote, in which a circular plasma of mercury spins at 50,000 RPM and 150 degrees Kelvin. When the magnetic field is disrupted, another gravity field of space-time coordinates can be dialed in. Then it's not even traveling, but more like matching a resonant frequency with another spot in space-time. Once that is dialed into the disrupted magnetic field, the TR-3B gets there by matching the complicated coordinates with the help of very advanced computers supplied by the gray extraterrestrial biological entities. Allegedly, another more advanced time machine for interstellar flight between stars and galaxies is called Phoenix 1 and is now being used, in which light years can be collapsed into a moment along with the time dimension. An illustration of that interstellar model is on page 66 of the new book, and John Titor II says that he piloted one to other planets in search for new Earths because life on this planet is no longer guaranteed. That came about because the US government in the 1980s was concerned that global climate change could be a big threat to national security. Authorities wanted to find out what later in the 21st century Earth looked like. So John Titor says 1979 was the year he was assigned to time travel 71 years into Earth's future to 2050. What he says he encountered is, quote, Hell on Earth, the title of his book's chapter 2. After this brief commercial break, John Titor II joins John Burroughs and me to detail what he encountered in Earth in the year 2050 and how that chaos related to another major Earth-changing event in January of 2018. That revelation led to an urgent mission to find other Earth-like planets that some humans could escape to, and how he came to be a time traveler for the United States Air Force in the first place. But right now, to begin, could you please describe in detail what the time travel process is and was like, and what you experienced when you entered the TR-3B at Area 51, Nevada in March of 1979 to go 71 years into Earth's future to 2050?
I initially was given flight training on the TR-3B, and I made many practice runs of short distances, and we didn't really discuss time travel until I had mastered the controls and could sit there with my co-pilot and take off and land and then maneuver it to an altitude and then go to a designated spot on the planet. And it is a technology unlike any other technology. The airframe itself is built so that it can be easily maintained and modular upgrades can be made to it. And what I was told was keeping the airframe supported for a long period of time is key to low maintenance costs. But even so, it costs millions of dollars to maintain one TR-3B. And the TR-3B itself, there is a small version, and then there is a football size field version that is very large.
So that's 300 feet, John. Do you mean that, 300 feet?
Yes. And that is capable of holding TR-3Bs within it. And a crew of substantial size and supplies to make journeys to the moon and to Mars, and actually conducted surveys of the moon and Mars using that spacecraft.
And just for our listeners, is the TR-3B, from your point of view, the same triangular craft that have been photographed around this planet that have the large white round lights in each vertex of a triangle?
Yes, that's it.
And when they are photographed by people, are you visible on purpose in the sky for some reason?
A lot of the flights initially that I made, they were termed practice runs, but we would go and do aerial photographs and air samples. In some cases, we would look at demographics and things like that. Later, I would even do water samples of the ocean remotely. So it was a great platform for doing research on.
And the government didn't care if we thought they were UFOs, because time machines would be considered even more science fiction, even if they were real and that's what you were doing.
Exactly. Plausible deniability, outright lies, intimidation. These are all tools that is used on the world's population.
Now, can you take us out, I think you had to go up at least 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, somewhere off the Earth's surface before you would start, I don't know what the word is, accelerating to the speed of light to surpass the speed of light. Can you please talk about what you are experiencing and how is that possible to do still in the, I'm going to say, the near proximity to our planet Earth?
Uh, Going the speed of light is not that difficult. If that airframe is designed to do it, the power plant's designed to do it. Uh, Going that fast, the most important thing is the navigational system. You want to make sure that you're not going to hit anything. Even if you hit something at whatever speed you're going at, it's going to present a problem for you. Uh, these spacecraft are lightly armored. The skins aren't that thick, so you could easily develop a problem, and that's the trick to it.
Well, when we were talking on Sunday, you were saying that when you are in the TRB, if I understand, you're sitting in some kind of a chair or a console, correct? And that's where you put in these coordinates that computers then deal to get you going past the speed of light. And then how do you get to 2050?
Um, Once you punch it into the navigational system and you pick the year, it does all that for you pretty much. You'll sit there and you will feel a hum. Uh, it doesn't really, it's not annoying or anything, but you'll feel the spacecraft hum, and any kind of lights that are on the outside of the spacecraft will become blurred. And when you reach the destination, if you're just going to a place on the Earth, if you were trying to make a quick trip to do reconnaissance in stealth mode over the South China Sea to look at islands that are being created by China, you could do it and they would never see you using stealth technology.
But we wouldn't travel at the speed of light around the other side of the Earth, would we?
You would travel pretty fast, but that speed of light, when it comes into play, is really when you're going to go to the moon, or you're going to go to Mars, and you
Okay.
lay in a coordinates. Now, if you're going to go to the future, uh, you obtain an altitude 2-3 miles up, and you punch it in the computer, and that is a flight. And I will say that you do go light speed, and you're going fast enough to create a gravitational wave, and the computer figures out the rest of it for you.
And it is sort of like getting to a resonant point in space time.
Yes, exactly. I would say that that's part of it. But the computers do almost all of that for you.
Are you, when you get to 2050, is there a slowing down, a screech, a physical anything? I mean, tell us what happened when you got to 2050. And in reading your book, it says it only took an hour of Earth time, that you left like 10 o'clock in the morning and you were at 2050 an hour later at 11 a.m. on the Earth.
Yes, and there is a slight slowing. You'll feel the spacecraft slow, but you don't feel inertia, because the spacecraft creates its own gravity. You're impervious to any of that. but you do feel a slight slowing, but not enough to disrupt you. If when we're doing it, we walk about the cabin.
And there were 15 of you on that first flight to 2050.
Yes.
And
I
how do you eat, drink, all of the things that humans must do? How does that work going in this craft at the speed of light for an hour and being at 2050?
We do have an area where we can microwave and do freeze dried foods. We there's no food replicators. No, water, freeze dried foods. Uh, there's some other drinks that we took on. We didn't take any kind of soft drinks or canned drinks, but water. We can make coffee, tea, those kinds of things. There were some things that were kind of freeze dried milkshakes that tasted terrible and I didn't like. But military style freeze dried foods.
And you get there. What is your first interaction with 2050?
Um, I think that we were doing aerial surveys to look at uh, how the water had risen from the North and South poles melting and looking at what was left of the North and South poles. And pretty much geographic North and South poles had very little ice on them, and the seas had risen considerably, and the temperature of the planet had risen uh, at least by 20, 25 degrees Fahrenheit.
And the maps in your book show that most of the major coastal cities of the entire planet were underwater.
Yes. Well, and today in 2016, what used to be the Maldives in the Indian Ocean uh, are underwater now. So the seas are rising and they will continue to rise as the ice sheet over Greenland is melting. The waters are rising.
And this is a mission that you took in March of 79 because our government was concerned about global climate change as a threat to national security. So, can you take us to the 15 of you? What are you looking at? Are you looking at screens, at windows? How does this work to get to 2050 in the Earth's future? What are you seeing and how are you seeing?
Uh, we do have cameras mounted on the outside of the um, craft, and they can literally see an open pack of cigarettes on the ground. So we get very good close up views of the Earth. We can also tap in to the internet. We can listen to the news and things like that on the internet. We also were able to take air samples, water samples. Uh, Most of our areas of research initially were photographing the entire planet and just looking at how much the waters had risen, and we were looking at uh, the air quality. Overall, air quality is very poor. Humidity has risen also almost everywhere on the planet.
Well, you titled chapter 2 of your book, Hell on Earth, and you are describing, can you describe in details why you called 2050 Hell on Earth?
Well, there's a complete breakdown of society as we know it. Uh, the police are very ineffective. The military has been relegated to basically protecting military bases that are still up and running. Um, Medical facilities are attached to their very limits. Food is a scarcity. A lot of people are going hungry because we're not able to grow food, and the food chain uh, is dying. The oceans are dying. The krill in the ocean, I believe, are dying, and the food chain that relies on krill to survive dies off. And this goes to the whales, dolphins. There's a lot of things that depend on krill for their survival. And the fisheries just start to die off. So third world countries that are depending on fisheries to survive uh, are encountering food scarcity and famine.
And one of the things that I noted as a great contradiction in all of this is on page 46, you say that the Greys were helping with this time travel technology. They helped build the ships and the computers and everything that you were doing. And yet, if the Greys could do that, they would know what was going to happen in 2050. And you can't help but keep saying, why wouldn't they help change all of this?
I believe that they knew it was going to happen. I believe that they may have communicated it, but I think that the military wanted to do their own independent verification. So sometimes you get the mission and you don't question it. Uh, the Greys use Earth more than anything else as a convenient spaceport. The reptilians seem to use Earth as a convenient spaceport. Uh,
Can you explain that more? What is a convenient spaceport?
a convenient spaceport is a spaceport they can use and not worry about being attacked or anything. They are visiting Area 51 on a regular basis. They go there, they do maintenance on their spacecraft, and then leave. And the tall whites do the same thing at Creech Air Force Base. And Charles Hall has reported on this in his books. The tall whites have been at Creech Air Force Base, I think, for uh, 20, 30 years, since the 50s, when it was Indian Springs Gunnery Range. I don't know exactly how long the tall whites have had a hall pass to go to Area 51, but they're there, and they're there in what I would say significant numbers, as many as a dozen spacecraft at a time. There are spacecraft, the smaller models, can seat 3, and then they have a larger model that seats up to, I think, a dozen.
If there are a variety of other intelligences that are using planet Earth underground and as spaceports through treaties with our government and other governments, isn't it in the interests of these other intelligences to help Homo sapiens sapiens surface life avoid the catastrophe that you are describing in chapter 2 by 2050?
They do have an agreement with the U.S. government and our NATO allies, and I haven't looked at the treaty specifically, but there is, I'm told, part of the treaty is they have a responsibility to come to our defense in a time of war. So they have a vested interest in this country and other NATO countries in coming to our defense against any enemy country that would attack us.
Well, now let's go to another big contradiction then. What you discover in 2050 in observation is a very surprising, isn't it? A surprising atmospheric ingredient that leads you further.
I know that
Radioactivity is what I'm referencing.
the radioactivity, yes. We were not told to look for radioactive uh, background radioactivity, but we did, and we discovered in our samplings of what would be normal background radioactive readings that they were considerably higher. And what we discovered after researching and looking at records online that we could obtain through the internet at that time was that there was a nuclear war between Russia, Iran, and the United States, UK, and France, and Israel.
In what month and year?
I think that it was January of 2018.
And that's not very long from September of 2016. And we've started with the discussion about you going to 2050 with global climate change priorities. And there you discover this radioactivity. What happens once you are there? What happens when you return from 2050 with this information?
They weren't. We basically had about, I think, a week to prepare our findings. When we finally got to the end of our investigations and everything, and we turned everything in, and then there was a debriefing held, and we were told that the probability of an all-out nuclear war with those countries was quite probable. It just hadn't happened yet.
But didn't you have a problem returning from 2050 because of 2018?
Standard precautions were that we were basically quarantined and checked for radioactivity. We all wore radioactive badges in case we'd had that problem. And no, the readings weren't significant enough at that time. And we didn't present any specific environmental issues coming back, but everything was gone over.
Well, but in your book, you describe where you're trying to come back, I believe, I don't know in which, if it wasn't the first mission, it was one of them, and that you had been 8 missions, I believe, to 2050. And at one point where you're trying to come back to 2000 to have maybe some political influence on the Earth because of the terrible environmental deterioration in 2050, wasn't it that you were trying to get back and you were told to avoid coming into 2018?
There was a situation where we had done a survey, and it was after the missions to the moon and Mars. We were surveying 10 planets that we thought were habitable by our species, and we were looking for probable Earth colonies off-world. And we were at this for 2 or 3 years, and we were on our way back, and we were told to not come back to the timeline that we had left from, but to come back in the future, which we did. And
okay, explain it to 2018, because for viewers, it's very difficult keeping track of all these goings, comings, different years, dates, all of this related to the Earth and eventually out into the Milky Way galaxy. So right now, 2050 set off alarm bells because of the deteriorated state of the planet that you all were showing. And then you were asked to keep going on 7 or 8 more missions. What was the specific mission where you tried to come back to 2018, I think it was, and you were told that you couldn't come back because there had been nuclear war?
Yes, and that was specifically after I had looked at 10 Earth-like planets beyond our solar system, and I was on my way back with 2 spacecraft, and I was in command of one of them, and we received a message to come back further ahead in time.
To what year, what month?
I would think probably 2030, before 2030, but somewhere in that time frame. I'd have to check the book.
What was the communication to you in the TR-3B?
It was a satellite communication, and basically it was encrypted, and we decoded it. And the satellites are used in space exploration. They have satellites when they sense a particular spacecraft in proximity, they transmit messages. So we were identified for messages, we received messages, and the messages were that they didn't want me to jeopardize what I had found as far as creating off-world colonies for our species, and wanted me to come back in the future.
Because of the nuclear war in January 2018?
Yes.
And that is a part of a timeline that was you all perceived as a reality of the future of Earth, correct, at the time?
Yes.
And radioactivity was basically destroying surface life on the Earth.
It basically created a nuclear winter, and you couldn't grow food all over the world, and the oceans and the fish in the oceans were polluted with radioactivity. People had radioactive poisoning. The populations were dying en masse from it. We don't have, in this country today, we do not have bomb shelters. We don't have places for the masses of people that we have in this country to ride out a nuclear winter with food and water to get past it. We don't.
The National Programming Office's continuity of government does in many underground installations for government authorities and military and intel, correct?
Yes, that covers just that small group of people.
Okay. So the surface was a mess, and you were perceiving, coming back, trying to get to 2018, that there had been this attack, and the book says it was an attack from Iran backed by Russia against Tel Aviv, Paris, London, and Washington, D.C., and that all 4 of those cities were destroyed on first strikes. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is your perspective on that timeline now as we speak, September 8th, 2016?
It could still happen. It could still happen. I know that we had a solution for changing the timeline. For the longest time, members of the 177th were told that our mission was to observe and report, and that we were not to change the timeline. We were just to preserve it. We could research specific historical events, but not to interfere. And this was one instance where I presented a plan to the Joint Chiefs because the death uh, related to radiation sickness all over the world was very significant. So my plan was to basically send an envoy to Tehran, Iran, and meet with the premier of Iran and tell him that we knew they were gearing up for an attack and present them with satellite photos of the aircraft they were going to use.
And you would have that be presented in Iran before January 2018 or in January 2018?
We did it in 2017.
What month in 2017?
I believe it's noted in the book, I think around December of 2017.
About a year and 3 months from where we are right now.
Yes.
Now,
can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Linda?
go, John.
Okay. So are you saying that you went back into the future and presented this to them in the future?
Actually, we went back in time. After I initially come back, we sent two envoys to Iran in what was probably a year and a half before we thought the war took place, and we had satellite photos of what Iran looked like after World War III. And we said that we told them that these photos were from the future, and they were very conclusive. And we said, we know what your plans are, using passenger aircraft as platforms to launch missiles against the United States and these other countries.
John, could you explain that? Could you explain how airliners, real airliners, would be used as the camouflage, and that the airliners with the nukes, where they would be positioned and how that would work? Can you explain that?
Basically, you could take a passenger aircraft, a rather large one. What is a 777? That would be big enough, and you could convert it to carry missiles with warheads. And then if they fly a couple hundred feet above and about 100 to 150 feet behind a passenger aircraft in what is normal travel lanes to those countries that were first taken out, both aircraft appear as one blip on the radar. And this goes back to after 9/11, we wanted to have improved transponders placed on aircraft so that we could locate them in a terrorist situation. And the Congress of the United States failed to fund that project.
Well, I'd like to go back to the 18 for now, okay? Because I'm trying to understand this, okay? Basically, if you were able to go forward in time, you got intel. What you did was you were able to get intel. And that would be no different than, let's just say, intelligence agencies have people on the ground and all this, and over the year of 2017, they start to discover chatter, they see some planes being refitted, just kind of like 9/11, where allegedly prior to 9/11, they uncovered some people that were training on just taking off and not landing and doing different things. So you discovered intel. What would be the necessity, and please help me understand this, that if you discovered this was going to happen in 18 and 50, that you came back and reported, why could they not just wait prior to the incident and stop the incident, or go to them and let them know what they're about to do, or even the equipment we would have available today, we could eliminate the threat before it even took off. What would be the necessity to go forward, come back, and then go back forward in time to alter it?
The necessity was that we would be avoiding rather high levels of radiation, and we were bringing back critical information on what turned out to be 2 new off-world colonies. And that information was deemed to be of very high value. But it was my plan that we would go back to 2017 and confront Hassan Rouhani with satellite photos from the future and convince him that we were aware of their plans for a sneak attack against this country and our allies.
And part of this is, John Titor, that we're sitting on September 8th, 2016, talking about your book describing going to 2050, where you first saw that the Earth wasn't doing well and that there was radioactivity, which led to the discovery in 2018, which was still in the future from 1979 when you left, about this being a radioactive or a nuclear attack from Iran. And you're still in the Earth time that you left in 1979, correct?
Yes.
And so that your plan to go to Iran in 2017, would you, from 79, did you come back and then say we need to go to 2017 in the future to do this, so that nothing happens between 79 and 2017 to 2018, which is where we are now?
Yes, and when I came back, I did report that we discovered that there'd been a nuclear war in our future. And I gave them the details. And I thought that they would work to make sure that didn't happen. But that is not what happens. That intelligence is either not presented to the right people or pushed aside or discounted totally, that we would be attacked. And it happened anyway.
Are you talking now about 9/11?
No, I'm not talking about 9/11. I'm talking about 2018.
So yeah, but we are not there yet.
Yeah, but Linda, it's kind of like, here's what I'm getting out of this. In other words, if you go forward, see it's happening, come back, stop it, and then go forward again, it doesn't exist this time, correct? Is that what you're trying to say? You still see it. To the day you left this project, that incident was still there, right? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm trying to say that you could change the timeline and millions of people wouldn't even know you changed the timeline. That's how it works.
Well, no, I got that, but here's what we're trying to understand. Okay, 18 hasn't happened yet, at least for us. Okay,
right.
So if in fact, okay, if I got intel, it doesn't matter when I got it or how I got it, but if I knew in January of 2018 we were going to get hit, I would take the steps necessary to stop it leading up to 18. But what it sounded like you said was you were in the future, you came back, you stopped in, tried to alter it, came back, but now you're still saying it still happens. Well, how would you know it still happens? How do we know it's going to happen if it's well aware now? Why wouldn't they stop it? In other words, why now would they? Because it is interesting you bring up a 777, and we're missing a 777. Okay, there is one missing. I mean, right. I understand everybody says it.
370.
Right, they said it crashed, but they've never found it. So what I'm getting at is, why are we not still capable of stopping it right up till the day it happens?
You have to understand, I went to 2050, I discovered that there had been a war, and I discovered there were radioactive levels. All of this was documented and rolled up into a report and turned in, okay? The intelligence, the scientific data, digitized, it's sent to higher ups that analyze it, and I'm given my next mission, which is a precursor to some very long missions. I'm told to photograph and survey the moon, and then photograph and survey Mars, and come back, which I do. And I have command of 2 spacecraft to do it. And then I'm at Area 51 and I get a month off. And then while I'm off for a month, I can come back. They say, oh, you have another mission. I said, what's the mission? They say, we have a list of 10 Earth-like planets that we want you to survey. We want them surveyed now. And I said, okay. And so they had the ships ready to go. And I had fresh crews, pretty much. And we went on that mission. And it was a very long mission, about 3 years. And when we're on our way back, I receive a message that there has been a war while I've been away and not to land. And so they want me to land in 2030, and which I do. And then we do another dump of data and scientific data that we've collected, and we get debriefed, and my crews are changed, and this time they're loading 2 spacecraft to put what would be advance parties to establish colonies on 2 Earth-like planets. And so I'm expecting that I'm going to go back and work on that. And instead they said, no, you've got a desk job now. And I said, what is it? And they said, you're the commander of the 177. And I'm promoted. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, we're still, like the earth is warming. We're in an environmental nightmare situation. Obviously, we weren't able to thwart the sneak attack. And all these questions I had were answered in the positive. They said, yes, we weren't able to stop it. I said, I gave you the information, but they said, it's still the war went forward and it was a catastrophe for humanity on the planet. And I said, well, we could take another cut at it. We could send somebody back to 2017 and try to talk to Hassan Rouhani. And I was given a go-ahead on that mission. And I described in the book what we did.
And John Titor, isn't this, all of this discussion, you are actually in the Earth year of 79?
No, I moved through the years.
So you did this in 2030, right?
Yes.
How old were you in 2030 then? Because if you don't mind, how old are you now?
You're 53 now, you told me.
No.
From 78 at Dulce.
I'm close to 70 years of age.
Okay, when you were there in 2030?
No, that would be 10 years. I'd be 15 years younger then in 2030. And I've gone on many other missions and been gone. There were some little missions that I did, 1 or 2 years gone. I couldn't put all the missions in the book.
Okay. Before we go to break, then I have a question for you. If you went to 30, in other words, you went forward, saw it, came back, went on a long mission, we're coming back, got diverted to 30 because of the war. So you're sitting there in 30 knowing the war happened. How did you end up back in 79 then?
I didn't go back to 79.
But you're here now. So you had to go back at some point to come back to today's time frame, which is prior to 2018.
And I discussed that in the book.
Well, I know, but we're trying to understand it.
On the radio, we're trying to understand.
I mean, that's a key
and
point.
on the radio. So I will tell you that in 2036, almost 2037, I'd done my last mission, and I'd had some very severe injuries, and I wanted to go and be with someone that I'd had a relationship with in the past, and I went back in time, and I hitched a ride with an extraterrestrial friend, and he took me back in time to the year 2000.
And you've been evolving from 2000 up till now?
I've from up to now, I came back to the year 2000, landed at Agua Dulce Airport with my friend Rock, and we had two spacecraft. They pushed one spacecraft into a hangar and closed the door on it and locked it. And they said, we're leaving that one for you. And I still have it. And then the woman that I'd come back to be with rolled up in a late model Honda. And I said goodbye to Rock and thanked his crew. And I started living in the year 2000.
Okay. And on that note, Linda, we're due a break. So let's take our first hard break, and we'll be right back, folks.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, John, okay. On the break, you were talking about how you went, right before we went to break, you were talking about how you went forward and were put on a desk job. But you also mentioned that there were times you would leave and come back, right? And you would come back at a different time frame. I call it time frame, like not so much a timeline, but a time frame at this point. So like if you left in March of 79, you might come back in December of 82. Why did they do that?
I don't know. I would come back, and then I'd be off on a mission again. And it's just like training and flying and coordinating missions. It all takes time, and it's not like everything is geared back to coming back in time to a specific month or even day in 1979. That's not the way it worked. It was a military career.
Well, no, I understand that, but were you coming back to the same people that sent you then? Were the same people in charge?
No, they changed. I had several commanders. I had several changes of crews. And I would say in the years between 2030 and 2036 that I became more responsible for training of those that would do time travel, the time travel teams themselves. And I spent a lot of time doing that and planning missions.
Okay, so I'm trying to get this straight. In 1979, which obviously prior to 79, we had the technology and the TR-3s to do time travel. So you were selected, recruited, went through the program, did your training, started flying missions, and then their goal was to put you in the future to coordinate the missions in the future. And were
I
those
don't think
missions,
that was their goal at all.
Then why would they leave you in the future?
It just worked out that way. The biggest jump was that I'd spent a lot of time off-world, and they didn't want me to come back anywhere near 2017 or 2018, and they wanted me to come back in the future, so I did.
So they wanted you to avoid. Let me ask one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it sounds like you're trying to tell me they wanted you to avoid the time frame when mankind allegedly has a major catastrophe. Is that what you're trying to say, or is that what it
That's
looks like?
exactly what I'm saying, yes.
So they didn't want you to interfere with this catastrophic event.
They wanted me to avoid it because they felt I had information about potential colonies that they wanted to establish off-world.
Right. So they didn't want you to die. Okay, I get that point now. You're saying that they did not want you to come back close to that time frame and die, so that therefore whatever you learned could never have happened if you died at that point. Okay, which is the confusing part about time travel. But okay, so you're in the future now, and it happened. Now, wouldn't everything in the future, being is that you're there now, and you know that you were in the past, would everything in the future being focused on getting back to beforehand the event to stop it again? And I know you said you mentioned that, but why did they not stop the event if they already knew how it was going to happen?
I know that I reported from my mission that I took to 2050 that there was the potential for nuclear war in 2018. I reported that. And then they sent me on more missions. And all I'm to do is to observe and report. I take no action that is not directed by strict orders. I just follow.
Right, orders. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, okay, you've now just on your book, and we're talking about it on the radio, said there's going to be a catastrophic event in January of 2018. Mm-hmm. And you said that you went, saw it, came back, went back, and it still happens. So I'm just trying to understand this. So considering that you still went forward, and the last time you left the future and came back to 2000, you still believe that this event still happens in 2018?
Very possible.
What would change?
So why can't we stop it?
And this goes to why I got Jason and Bob to help me with this book. I want to make sure. I want people to know that we're looking at Armageddon. Oh yeah, we are. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen again. Do I wonder where MH370 is? No, I know where MH370 is. It landed in Iran.
You know that for a fact?
Yes.
What you mean, a fact from the time travel?
Yes.
Okay, so who took it over? Iranian special ops?
There were two Iranians on that flight with forged passports, and they bought one-way tickets for that flight from Kuala Lumpur. They were supposed to fly to Beijing, but the flight never landed there. It landed in Iran.
Okay, so all right, you said there'd be multiple aircraft. Where are they going to get the rest of them?
Well, they want to hit Israel, France, United Kingdom, and the U.S. If you fly the aircraft, as I told you, you look like one blip on the radar. You can't see them coming that way.
But where does Iran get the airliners for those 4 cities? If they may have one, but how do they get 3 more?
They actually have airliners of their own. They have them right now.
Well, I understand that makes sense. You're going to take some of your own airlines out of the inventory, but then why take 777? I mean, because if you get caught, okay, let me sum this up. I don't believe for 1 minute that the military, our government doesn't know where that airplane is. I just don't believe that. Based on radars or some government, if not ours, somebody knows where.
Look how much money they spent looking for it.
Yeah, but that'd be a cover. I mean, it's real easy. I mean, you
that
just
was
want
a very
everybody.
expensive. They spent almost $100 million looking for it in the Indian Ocean, and they never found a single piece of it. They found pieces of other aircraft. Big deal.
Well, no, I got that, but the point is, why risk taking the aircraft if this is what their plan is, that they can't just use their own aircraft? Is what I'm getting at.
You know, your guess is good as mine, but the whole thing you can't explain away are the 2 Iranians on that flight with forged passports. That's
Okay.
fact.
I'm not saying it isn't. I didn't read that, but I didn't at that time frame in my life. I wasn't following it that closely, other than it's still missing. But I guess what I'm trying to get at is, okay, again, you, okay. Let me ask you another question. This person you came back to be with in 2000, does she perish in 2018?
No.
It's because you know what's going to happen.
I would tell you that I have resources and options, and I just told you what one of them was, that I have
To go off planet.
I'm very mobile.
Yeah, but you've got the today in 2016, do you still have the alliance with Rock? Do you still have the access to a TR-3B? Is your plan to leave Earth and go to Wolf 1061c or one of these planets that you have looked at and reported to our government that is suitable for humans? And as you said on the phone, you think there could be 200,000 people on Wolf 1061 that have been put there so that humanity would have a foothold on a planet where they could survive, and it probably would be related to all of the missing persons cases that David Paulides has investigated?
I wouldn't say that many, and I wouldn't say it would be missing persons cases, but I would say that I had written a white paper, and I basically said that a lot of people, it was been noted from academia, from the sciences, and they all seem to have suddenly upped and died, and they were all people like biologists, medical people, people that you would use in an off-world colony. And so the people are basically recruited and given the opportunity to start new lives on another world. What an opportunity.
But have you or has anybody that you know in the 177th program been to Wolf 1061c and been there either by going light speed or time travel to see what is happening with humans on Wolf 1061c that's 13.9 light years from Earth?
I did the original survey. I haven't been back, but I have been offered a position on one of the off-world colonies if I wanted it. And basically, I've talked to my wife, Marcia, and she said no. But
so what are you planning to do between now and January 2018?
I will just have to be alert, and hopefully that time that it won't be repeated again. I will tell you, I'm very much a prepper. I think I've told you I live in a government-controlled compound. We got about 20, 30 acres at the compound and 2 hangars and 2 helicopters and a fleet of SUVs. I have 24/7 guards and live behind 2 chain link fences with concertina wire. And I'm in a position where I could go to a safe place very quickly if I had to.
John, what is behind your being able to be so guarded, get this story out in September of 2016? What insight can you give us about the argument, the conflict going inside of the U.S. government about telling the truth and not telling the truth?
The biggest thing is there's 2 factions within our government. And one faction wants to tell the truth and protect the United States, our allies in the world. And there are forces that don't try to do that. Unfortunately, this country has been defrauded. in so many different areas. I will tell you the biggest fraud perpetrated on the people of the planet is that President Obama is our first Muslim president. I will tell you that the Joint Chiefs and the military despise him. There is a tremendous split within the military and the executive branch of government, that Obama refuses to listen to intelligence from the military. Obama places this country's future in jeopardy. He places the future of the entire world in jeopardy.
But he will not be president after November 8th, well, January of 2017. So when you time traveled and you saw what happened in 2018, who was president of the United States?
And I'm asked this question continually. And I know who the next president is. I will tell you that if 2018 happens, that both the president and vice president will die of radiation poisoning. I will tell you that I've been asked not to say who the president is at that time because I want people to go to the polls. And this is a situation where I could definitely influence a national election. But yes, I know who the next president is. I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, fair enough. So let's go back to the last thing you just said. Why would our president die? Both of them die of radiation because of the fact that the security measures in place would keep both of them from being exposed to the radiation and passing. They would be protected underground. So how?
Right.
There's a bunker underneath the White House, but it's not a bunker that protects you. It doesn't make you impervious. At some point, you have to come up for air. And
right, but they have the equipment. But they would have the equipment to transport him out of there and keep him moving to another location. I mean, all I'm getting at is that they would have the equipment in place to transport him out of there if that was a high radiation zone and it wasn't totally destroyed. So is he going to die because of?
And he's sitting there in the White House. He has very limited options. He's not going to get on.
John Titor, in 9/11, which you also discuss in the book, and why that the government had advance on all of that from time travel and chose to let it happen. And yet we know that that President Bush and Cheney and company went to underground facilities in the Continuity of Government National Programming Office administration. They went underground to a variety of places.
As it is when 9/11 happened, George W. Bush was sitting in a classroom of school children in Florida. And they came in and told him. And then he flew to Atlanta. And then in Atlanta, he made the decision to come back to Washington, D.C. I don't know where Cheney was in all this. I don't know if Cheney was in a bunker at any point.
No, they took Bush to Offutt. He was moved to Offutt. He was moved off it, and there was protocol. He wanted to go back, but they wouldn't let him because there were certain procedures that took place because they didn't know where all the attacks were coming from. Cheney was immediately put underground, but the other thing is they can be moved underground too. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to understand this. And I'm trying to really grasp this because some of what you're saying I don't discredit as possibly happening because we have the signs of there's growing tensions with Iran. There's growing tensions with Korea.
Russia.
Korea. Well, it's more Korea and Iran that I'm worried about, Linda, because of the fact that Russia would not want their fingerprints on this right away. So you've got the problems with Korea, and they're developing these missiles. They could do it with subs. You've got Iran doing their thing, and we just gave them a ton of money. So there are signs that what you're saying are possible, but I guess I keep trying to get back to this. Are you just saying that the people have to be aware of this? If you did this project is there. Different people have to be aware of this, and they're just going to allow this to happen. Is that your take on this? That this is going to happen?
It's very possible.
Why are they letting you talk about it then?
It's I would say it comes down to me being very conscious of my personal security and the security of my wife, and going to extreme security measures. And the people that guard me are extremely loyal to me.
But what about the American and French and Israeli? I mean, what you've reported from the 2050 and the 2018 time travel is or were true, it seems that everybody should be trying to stop this. And is part of what's coming through in this discussion is that it feels like that time travel is extremely iffy, and that nothing is locked in. Even if you've gone to 2050, you say you've seen the Earth looking horrible, but it is so hard for even you who have been in these machines doing this to explain to us exactly what happens, where you end up, and if you did try to warn the Joint Chiefs of Staff and there is no action as of September of 2016 to change this, then what is the value of time travel?
There is still value for time travel. My role is there's two reasons I wrote the book. I wanted to prevent Armageddon and World War III. I wanted to warn people of the environment, and I wanted to tell people what we're all headed to on this planet. It will come to pass, I'm very sure of it, that those with financial means will be able to move away from this planet and possibly go to new off-world colonies. I don't see that as a problem for the very rich, but for the poor and the middle class, they won't have that opportunity.
But I guess there's two things. I have to say this much, okay? I've started reading your book. I'm a little skeptical of a lot of this, but then again, if someone would have came forward and said 9/11 was going to happen, I would have been very skeptical, if not hard to believe that was possible. Do you understand me? So based on the time frame we're in and the issues that are going on involving the third world countries, the tension with Russia, even China, and the nuclear threat and everything, you have to take this seriously. But there's two things that stand out to me. Number one, they've allowed you to talk about this, otherwise you wouldn't be on this radio show and you wouldn't have gotten the book released. Oh, and one thing before I go further, did you have the book vetted by the Pentagon or people in power?
No.
Okay. So you're in a secure compound, but you were allowed to put this book out. So here we're looking forward to 18, which could be a very troubling time, no doubt. This is the time frame we're in going forward with who could be the president, with everything that's going on financially. So we have these issues coming up, and one of your comments is the rich could survive. Why would the rich want to let this happen? Why do we want to leave this planet unless there would be like an asteroid or something hit us where we had no control over? Why isn't all the efforts being put forward to save this planet and the habitat we're in and continue on? Why would, based on what you've discovered and everything that's going on, why would everything be in high gear to stop this from happening?
Look, John, look at it this way. Let's just step back in time and say we're living in Pompeii, and I'm telling you that Vesuvius is going to erupt and there may be a lava flow, and perhaps we should move to another community down the coast until these little eruptions stop. And Vesuvius stops spewing ash. And there were some very wealthy, well-to-do people that didn't go anywhere, and they stayed there to the very last gasp of air. And they're still there, mummified.
Well, John, I think out of all of this, the thing that's confusing and frustrating is if everything you've said up to this point about what could happen in January of 2018 were true, reading from page 101 in your new book, it says, quote, significant changes to a timeline can create a parallel timeline. We live in a multiverse, and creating a deviation in an existing timeline will create a parallel universe, and time travelers might not be able to return to their home base. And you stressed this the other night, saying that when you try to do anything in timeline manipulation, it can backfire and cause catastrophes even greater than what you've seen.
Hey, Linda, before he answers that, I just got notified we are due our last break, so that'd be a great point to come back on off the break.
Thank you, Race. John, before the break, I was quoting from page 101 in your new book about significant changes to a timeline can create a parallel timeline. Coming back, could we go to a question that seems to emerge out of all of this? Could all of the people listening to us right now on Phenomenon Radio, could hearing the words, hearing the confusion, hearing about possibilities, and one being that there could be a major series of nuclear attacks in January of 2018 that would obliterate for Tel Aviv, Paris, London, and Washington, D.C., from your timeline view of 2018, by just discussing, by people reading, can this information change the future by creating a timeline that we would continue on in consciousness without the nuke attack?
I'm hoping that it will raise awareness and make people think about it. I don't know. There will always be people that will be in denial of the events that are going on around us at this very moment. That wars don't happen anymore, and that the environment's okay, and global warming is a lie that people try to spin on us. But I don't believe that. I believe that in the future, mankind will be faced with some very hard issues. And the environment is going to precipitate famine in the world. And we will have a time come when we won't be able to grow enough food to feed the people. We'll have a time come when the oceans will have died. And I also believe that there are countries, one of them being Iran, an Islamic state that believes the West should die by the sword.
What about the grays, the tall whites, the reptilian humanoids, the tall blondes, and even the Anunnaki that you write about in an entire chapter in this book, living on a planet called Nibiru out in the Oort cloud, and that they've engineered that planet to have light, even though they're a quarter of a light year away?
Yeah, those species may not hang around. During 2018, some of those species actually fight with us and help us defeat those who have attacked us. I would say that the tall whites and the grays and the reptilians have a vested interest in this planet and in this country because we've allowed them to have secure spaceports, and they seem to like it here.
And why wouldn't any one of those species that are using our country through treaties, why wouldn't they just go and evaporate Iran?
It's not a small place. It's a rather big place. And do they have the capabilities? Do they have very advanced weapons? And they do. And their agreement with us is in such a state that they will come to our defense and help us in the event of war against those that have perpetrated war on us. They will. And they actually do.
Go ahead, John.
Me? Oh, okay.
John Titor. All I was going to say is that William Mills Tompkins, that naval flight engineer that we talked about on Sunday, he said that he just called a spade a spade. He said that what is happening on this planet and other planets are very ancient wars that are being conducted from Anunnaki and reptilians against other types, and that they're doing it through the camouflage on this planet of human bodies. Do you think that the complexity of Iran and the Middle East is in that category and still related to the Anunnaki?
I do not. I do not. Iran is poisoned by the religion that the government speaks to its people. And they continually speak about Americans as we are the devil and infidel, and that we can be defeated, and that we should be killed because we're not true believers.
And you don't think that that's inspired by behind the scenes matrix of extraterrestrial wars?
No, not at all.
Okay, so can I try to sum my thoughts on what you've been saying? Okay, you firmly believe in the future because what you saw that environmentally we're screwed. But then again, if we have a nuclear exchange in 18, that would contribute more to us environmentally being screwed than anything else that we're doing right now. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so but if they stopped the actual attack, somehow we stop this, okay, then we still would have a major problem going forward environmentally.
Yes.
Okay. And forgetting about our friends at this point, if in fact, and I just have to keep going back to this, and we talked a little bit for a second off the air on this, and your point was that, well, okay, we have a volcano about to ready to erupt, even when they announce it, and people still stay and they die, okay? So now we have some warnings that something could happen. And your warning about what you're saying is possible in 18, or I would push it back a year. If I was going to pull a stunt, I would try it right at the inauguration. I wouldn't wait till 18. I would try it earlier, right there at that interchange of government. I guess a year later would make sense because whoever's in charge would still not have their feet totally wet because whatever. But that's the thing that concerns me about this more than anything. It's feasible what you said happening could happen. And I guess when I go back to this is that if we're aware of this now, I just want to keep harping, if we're aware of this and you've got people inside the military that are well aware of this and the capabilities, why would we not stop it?
Exactly.
And this
that's the puzzle.
Goes back to another piece of history, Pearl Harbor. People knew of an imminent attack and did not think that it was worth picking up a telephone and talking to the commander at Pearl Harbor and saying that an attack is imminent. They sent a wire and then the wire wasn't delivered in time.
Okay, so now what you're telling me is that, okay, because I've read the conspiracy stuff on Pearl Harbor. The radars were shut down. It was clear we forced Japan into this attack and everything else, and there was reasons behind it which do add up. But that was one level. What you're talking about now is if somebody else wants this to happen, what would be the benefits to mankind to destroy our habitat? It's one thing to put a virus out there and kill millions of people or something like that, but what would be the benefits of launching a nuclear war that would destroy so much? You saw it, you went in the future and what they were fighting. There had to have been a discussion on why it took place or why it wasn't stopped. Wasn't there a discussion? You knew it was going to happen, and yet then you went to the future and it happened. Okay, why wasn't there a discussion on why it wasn't to stop? That's what I'm trying to understand.
I don't know. I know that I observed and I reported, and I discharged my duty by doing so. But those people that I reported to didn't do their duty, obviously, because I thought of several different courses of action to be taken. Once that information was brought back to a time where it would have really been beneficial and kept it from happening. I agree with you totally.
Okay,
but
so
John Titor, is it possible that time travel is looked at like remote viewing is by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all, that it is something that they use, but it's not considered to be any kind of a hard science, and that if parallel timelines are always being created by impacts on timelines, then it may be that the future is never really clear?
Oh, I don't think that you always are creating parallel timelines. To create a parallel timeline, it takes a significant act. Creating a parallel timeline, I will give you an example, and here it is. Let's say that we know there's going to be an asteroid of significant size to end life on this planet, be an extinction level event. And we go back in time, we know about, we do the time travel, know about the asteroid, and take appropriate steps. Would that in itself create a parallel timeline? Possibly. But I don't think it's known yet what it actually takes, what the threshold is. Okay?
Is the reason why you're doing this radio and the book because you are gambling that if enough minds and consciousnesses are aware of this possibility, it could change the outcome in January 2018?
Yes. There you go.
Okay, why were you... Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm also hoping that people start worrying about the vast amount of plastic in our oceans and the condition of the planet environmentally. I would like to see this planet not die by 2100. And the plain fact of the matter is that scientists are saying now that all life on this planet, 2100, 2200 at the outside, all life as we know it, if we continue with the environment as we are, there will be no life on this planet.
But why would the grays, the whites, why would any of the non-humans, we started off with your describing in the book that it was the gray types that enabled us to have the time travel equipment, the TR-3Bs, the new advanced interstellar machine that we've been working hand to hand with grays to do time travel. Why wouldn't these advanced societies, if they're out there and have some vested interest in human evolution in this planet, come in and stop all of this?
It's not up to them. What will happen is they will leave. They will go someplace else. They'll just leave.
Okay.
Why?
Makes
Why?
sense.
If the planet is not hospitable or habitable for them, they'll leave. And
But they could prevent it, is my point. They could prevent it. They know how.
I believe they've offered suggestions, but we know what to do and we don't do it. We consistently don't protect the environment. We don't stop cutting trees in the region of the Amazon. We continue to cut trees there. The Chinese have whole days in Beijing where they tell the population to stay home because the air is so bad. Whole days during the week where they just tell everybody to stay home. You can't breathe the air.
And how I'm going to use the word likely is it that there are human colonies right now in the several thousands underground on Mars at Wolf 1061c and another planet that you've mentioned?
Mars is not hospitable to our life form as it is. It's not.
Underground facilities is what I'm asking on Mars.
No. Mars would need to be terraformed. Man can't live in caves 24/7. We need to get out in the sunlight, breathe the air. This is part of our physiology. We can't live in a cave.
Wolf, what about Wolf?
Wolf 1061c is habitable and meets the criteria. And there were 2 planets that I reported that were very habitable and that we have colonies on.
And where was the other one besides Wolf 1061c?
I believe Kepler.
One of the Kepler ones. And do you know for a fact from discussions when you were reporting to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, do you know for a fact if there are Homo sapiens sapien colonies right now in the 2016 timeline at Wolf 1061c?
I believe there are, yes. They wouldn't have invited me there otherwise.
Okay. And so no matter what happens on Earth, if all of this are true, humanity already has been preserved on at least Wolf 1061c going forward.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I believe that is a plan for our species to survive, but there are millions of people on this planet that will die rather unceremoniously because there'll be no medical care infrastructure, there'll be no police, there'll be no grocery store to go down to get a gallon of milk. Won't be there. And and it's not our children, but our grandchildren, so to speak, that are really going to suffer.
If something happens in less than 2 years, we're all going to suffer, according to your book. I got the whole environment.
A major headache, radiation poisoning. The millions will just die. The whole problem is, and we knew this after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So many people, if they just washed themselves off afterwards, would have survived. But they didn't know what to do. And so you're looking at many countries, third world countries, that will get radiation in the atmosphere, and there may not have been a detonation for 1,000 miles near them, but they'll get the radiation and they'll get sick. And then the other thing is that the rains will deposit radiation on the ground, and so your ground is polluted now. You can't like one of the things they say, well, if you scrape off the top 18 to 24 inches, then you can grow crops. Well, most crops grow in 18 to 24 inches of ground. That's the fertile ground that farmers use. What's underneath is the hard pan that they can't really break except with a tractor and a ripper. So, and many countries don't farm that way, but the fish are going to die. So I'm trying to raise awareness. I'm trying to say everyone listen.
But John Titor, if time travel from 79 to, if it's ongoing now in 2016, the human Earth timeline that we have time traveled, and it doesn't change something as terrible as nuking in January of 2018, what does time travel accomplish?
Well, if we've only managed to establish 2 off-world colonies, then that's what it accomplishes.
Okay, 2
Those
questions.
colonies will survive, hopefully.
So, which is what we're pushing for now, to get out into interstellar space. 2 questions, okay? Does it make a difference, because you said you won't tell us who the next president is, but does it make a difference on A, which one it is, on how this may play out, and 2, we've only got a couple minutes left. Is there some signs that people, you said you want to raise awareness, because obviously the most critical thing that could happen between now, going forward, would be a nuclear exchange in 18. So what warning signs should people, you said there were 2 Iranians on that plane with fake passports. Okay, what other warning signs should people start paying attention to? Because there was plenty of signs out there for 9/11 that people, overlooked. What signs should you be looking forward for that something like this could happen in 18? And does it make a difference on who gets elected, whether or not this will happen or not, or less of a chance?
Okay, I'm going to say this. That I'm against Hillary Clinton becoming president. And clearly, she is not qualified to be the commander-in-chief. I believe that the country will suffer a level of corruption, of political corruption and graft on an unparalleled basis. She's in it for the money. She doesn't care about the people. Is that what you wanted to hear?
No, actually, no. I just wanted to know if either one of them can make a difference in not having a nuclear war, is what I'm more concerned about.
I do think that Donald Trump could make a difference, yes.
Okay. Now, is there warning signs to look for between now and 18?
Well,
we've only got about a minute left, so.
We're seeing the warning signs now. The Russians actually use Iranian bases to attack Syrian rebels now. They're very in bed with the Iranians. Russians and Iranians are, you might as well view them as one single military entity. The Russians have sold them missiles that can reach this country. Their gunboats, the Iranian gunboats, have challenged our naval vessels in the Gulf over there and on the Arabian Peninsula there. I think that the Republican Guards believe they can win a war against the United States. The Russians believe they can win a war against the United States. You can see that things are heating up because Putin's bodyguard and chauffeur was killed in an automobile accident. It's not to say that that accident wasn't meant to get Vladimir Putin too. We don't know.
Okay. We're coming in at the top of the hour. I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you, John.
And I hope that people think about my message.
It's just, what can we change?
we have to do what we can do.
Well, Linda, that was definitely a very, very interesting interview as far as what he was trying to tell us. What's your take on all that?
Well, it's frustrating to me because on Sunday before this show, I talked with him for 4 hours on the phone. And that John Titor was intelligent and articulate and fluent and giving me many more details about what it was like to be in what he was describing as this TR3B that would take them to some place in time, 2050, in 1 hour of Earth time, and trying to understand that, and how all of this came about, knowing that the John Titor the First story is one of the more controversial issues that was ever on Art Bell when we were doing that broadcast back in the 2000-2001 period. And that was a John Titor who said he was a time traveler. And this one, John Titor, Roman numeral 2, as he describes himself, this whole story came to me about a month ago in early August when Jason Quitt, a very nice young man, met me at a conference about a year ago. His particular focus in life is on things having to do with spiritual and meditation, and that is what he focuses on. And Bob Mitchell, the third author on this triple authored book, this new ebook, they got together with this man, John Titor. And when Jason contacted me, he said, this is not the John Titor, the one from 2000, 2001. We've been working with him for a long time. This book is going to come out at, originally, they thought it would be September 30th, because John Titor, the two, was very concerned about what was going to happen geopolitically on the planet between now and 2018. And he felt urgently that this book, or the ideas in the book, needed to be talked about people. And in early August, they said he had cancer, he was sick. Bob Mitchell also has cancer and is very sick, and that they felt that they had to get this book out as early as September in order to have these, John Titor, for example, be able to speak for himself along with Jason and Bob Mitchell. So that's how it started. And in that very first discussion, I said, I need a DD-214. I always ask that from anybody who comes to me as a military person. And they said at the time they would try, and I needed any certificates, any real photos that could have real source photo ID. And eventually the next step was they sent me a working draft of the ebook. When I went through the ebook, there were some fascinating pieces that resonated with material I've been exposed to for the last 37 years. And some of the images were very interesting. But again, I called Jason Quitt and I called John Titor and said, I very much need some sort of documentation, real source photo information, because what you've got is a manuscript and it's jumping years in time, but there's nothing in here that anybody can grab a hold of and say this is firm evidence for such a fantastic story about time traveling in 79 to 2050 and seeing a planet in self-destruction and linking it to January of 2018 of a nuclear attack by Iran on 4 major world cities. Somehow we've got to have some more documentation. Everybody agreed. And that's how it evolved to the Sunday before we did the Phenomenon radio broadcast tonight, that I talked with John Titor for 4 hours. And in that discussion, I asked him again, I said, I really need your DD-214. I get one from every military person I work with. He said, I understand. I will try. It's difficult to get documents of my life because my life is so odd. And I will try to get a redacted, meaning it would be partial with name and hopefully rank and some assignments and other things blanked out to you before you go on the air. Now, nothing came to me that is in the form of a document or certificate. And in the week leading up to our broadcast tonight on September 8th, 2016, the book, the ebook, climbed to the #1 book in the UFO category on Amazon.com, meaning that a lot of people are very interested in this story. So I look at what we did tonight in 2 hours as something that started a month ago, and we did what I hope would be a bit of a reality check on an extremely complex, weird story in which we're all trying to understand, has the United States government, with or without a John Titor, but with others, been actually using gray extraterrestrial technology to time travel, move dimensions, cross this universe, go to other planets? That is what William Mills Tompkins, the Navy flight engineer, says in his book. It is basically what is being hinted at in the Tom DeLonge work. It has been described by other whistleblowers in pieces that our government has very advanced technologies. And when we did Phenomenon Radio 1 year ago in September of 2015, and we had on Lynn Buchanan, who was a remote viewer working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, about his remote viewing of extraterrestrials, his discussion of friendlies and unfriendlies that were psychic and unpsychic, and some are a real enemy and some are true allies. He said that a personal friend from the 1980s working in the Defense Intelligence Agency is now the manager of interstellar trade between Earth, this solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, and other galaxies. So where does the truth start and stop? Where do the lies and counterintelligence, misinformation start and stop? In this John Titor II program tonight on Phenomenon Radio, it seems to me that we are having put in our face how difficult it is to grasp or even get our feet on solid ground in so many of these facets of the phenomena. But at the same time, there are too many whistleblowers that have shown me documents, have shown me real photos. And I know we're not alone in this universe, and that one of the goals of Phenomenon Radio is to try to understand what happened in Rendlesham Forest in December of 1980, where the phenomena there was great and faceted. And today, in 2016, the subjects that are coming at us and that we are trying to at least share with audiences on Phenomenon Radio include time travel, other dimensions, and moving point to point through extraterrestrial technology in a universe that we really don't understand.
John, what do you think about it?
My take is this. The original John Titor made some interesting predictions when he first appeared in the early 2000s about what our future could be. Some of what I guess he said at that point has actually started to happen, as far as there wasn't a lot of unrest at that point between China, Russia, and us. And some of that earlier predictions that he made when he came forward the first time seem to somewhat be playing out, especially in the time frame we're in now. This guy that we had on tonight, to me, didn't do anything for me. I'm just being straight up. He has provided no proof as far as who he is, that the program he said he was in existed, that any of what he said took place, has taken place. The original John Titor said there was going to be a nuclear war in 2015. We've passed that time frame. This guy now says there could be a nuclear war in 2016.
January 2018.
Yes, 2018. Some of what he says could lead to that is possible. There's no doubt in my mind. I've read that area. the way it could go down is possible. So you have to consider that. But here's my take on all this. Yes, Phenomenon Radio is here to explore the unexplained. Okay. We're trying to get as close to the truth as possible based on one hand tied behind our back, because a lot of the information is being held secret inside the governments of the world. One of the things that we've exposed over this last year has been technology and the advancement of it. And where has that come from? Just tonight, they released the fact that a destroyer now has the capabilities to be almost stealth mode, and the fact that it could use EM pulse weapons and a type of gun and weapon that was just deemed as fiction 5, 6, 7 years ago. My hypnosis showed something having to do with Rendlesham could tie into time travel. So did Penistons. So is it possible? Yes. Have we had any hardcore proof provided so far to show that it has taken place or is taking place? No. Did this guy do anything to further that tonight? No. So am I still on the fence on it? Yes, because of my experience. But I'm also open-minded to this because based on the technology advances we have had openly talked about now inside the Department of Defense and the other governments of the world, which usually means whatever we're talking about today, where are we really? Because usually whatever we're displaying today, we're 30 to 40 years ahead of that currently that has not been exposed to the government.
That's right. 50, is there a slowing down, a screech, a physical anything? I mean, tell us what happened when you got to 2050. And in reading your book, it says it only took an hour of Earth time, that you left like 10 o'clock in the morning and you were at 2050 an hour later at 11 a.m. on the Earth.
Yes. And there is a slight slowing. You'll feel the spacecraft slow, but you don't feel inertia because the spacecraft creates its own gravity. You're impervious to any of that. But you do feel a slight slowing, but not enough to disrupt you. If when we're doing it, we walk about the cabin.
And there were 15 of you on that first flight to 2050?
Yes.
And how do you eat, drink, all of the things that humans must do? How does that work going in this craft at the speed of light for an hour and being at 2050?
We do have an area where we can microwave and do freeze-dried foods. There's no food replicators. No. Water, freeze-dried foods. There's some other drinks that we took on. We didn't take any kind of soft drinks or canned drinks, but water. We could make coffee, tea, those kinds of things. There were some things that were kind of freeze-dried milkshakes that tasted terrible and I didn't like. But military-style freeze-dried foods.
And you get there, what is your first interaction with 2050?
I think that we were doing aerial surveys to look at how the water had risen from the North and South poles melting, and looking at what was left of the North and South poles, and pretty much geographic North and South poles had very little ice on them, and the seas had risen considerably, and the temperature of the planet had risen at least by 25 degrees Fahrenheit.
And the maps in your book show that most of the major coastal cities of the entire planet were underwater.
Yes. Well, and today in 2016, what used to be the Maldives in the Indian Ocean are underwater now. So the seas are rising, and they will continue to rise as the ice sheet over Greenland is melting. The waters are rising.
And this is a mission that you took in March of 70.
Other technology, the airframe itself is built so that it can be easily maintained and modular upgrades can be made to it. And what I was told was keeping the airframe supported for a long period of time is key to low maintenance costs. But even so, it costs millions of dollars to maintain one TR-3B. And the TR-3B itself, there is a small version, and then there is a football size field version that is very large. So
that's 300 feet, John. Do you mean that, 300 feet?
Yes. And that is capable of holding TR-3Bs within it. And a crew of substantial size and supplies to make journeys to the moon and to Mars. And actually conducted surveys of the moon and Mars using that spacecraft.
And just for our listeners, is the TR-3B, from your point of view, the same triangular craft that have been photographed around this planet that have the large white round lights in each vertex of a triangle?
Yes, that's it.
And when they are photographed by people, are you visible on purpose in the sky for some reason?
A lot of the flights initially that I made, they were termed practice runs, but we would go and do aerial photographs and air samples. In some cases, we would look at demographics and things like that. Later, I would even do water samples of the ocean remotely. So it was a great platform for doing research on.
And the government didn't care if we thought they were UFOs, because time machines would be considered even more science fiction, even if they were real and that's what you were doing.
Exactly. Plausible deniability, outright lies, intimidation. These are all tools that is used on the world's population.
Now, can you take us out? I think you had to go up at least 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, somewhere off the Earth's surface before you would start, I don't know what the word is, accelerating to the speed of light, to surpass the speed of light. Can you please talk about what you are experiencing and how is that possible to do still in the, I'm going to say, the near proximity to our planet Earth?
Going the speed of light is not that difficult if that airframe is designed to do.
In 1982, at Denver's CBS station KMGH, I produced a TV documentary about astronaut training. One of my film locations was Ball Aerospace near Boulder. There, I met a ring laser physicist from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base who knew about my investigations of animal mutilations linked to an alien intelligence that interacted with Earth. To my surprise, he said that he knew there were ETs that could bend space and time point to point. Hundreds, thousands of light years could be traveled rapidly, and time itself could be traveled forward and backward. Now, in September 2016, comes an ebook on Amazon.com called Disclosure, The Chronicles of John Titor II. John Titor says there was a counterintelligence imposter in 2000 to 2001 on the Art Bell program, who was deliberately trying to discredit the real U.S. Air Force Area 51 John Titor time traveler, the man who will be talking with us today. But like trying to walk in a hall of mirrors with a quicksand floor, trying to prove what is true and what is not true is very difficult, and most of what you will hear tonight will seem impossible. The ebook is divided into different years and locations in which John Titor says he traveled during his United States Air Force work as, quote, commander of the 177th Time Travel Division, close quote, based at Area 51, Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. Beginning in 1978, John Titor writes that his first practice runs were to the moon and Mars. The time travel devices he calls TR-3Bs. They are triangular aircraft with a large round light at each vertex. The trick to time travel, he told me, is being able to exceed the speed of light. Physicist Albert Einstein would argue that is not possible because at the speed of light, mass becomes infinite. However, John Titor says, when you pass 186,000 miles a second, you can dial in space-time coordinates that can be matched in resonance by the TR-3Bs. The TR-3B triangle machines were built with the help of non-humans known as Greys, according to Titor. On pages 42 and 59 of the ebook, there are what are described as photos of a triangular TR-3B flying in Earth's sky. It looks like the triangle seen and photographed over Belgium from 1989 to 1990. One of those photos is at the front of the UK Condign report that John and I have discussed so much on previous Phenomenon Radio broadcasts. John Titor says that TR-3Bs have, quote, magnetic field disruptors, close quote, in which a circular plasma of mercury spins at 50,000 RPM and 150 degrees Kelvin. When the magnetic field is disrupted, another gravity field of space-time coordinates can be dialed in. Then it's not even traveling, but more like matching a resonant frequency with another spot in space-time. Once that is dialed into the disrupted magnetic field, the TR-3B gets there by matching the complicated coordinates with the help of very advanced computers supplied by the gray extraterrestrial biological entities. Allegedly, another more advanced time machine for interstellar flight between stars and galaxies is called Phoenix 1 and is now being used, in which light years can be collapsed into a moment along with the time dimension. An illustration of that interstellar model is on page 66 of the new book, and John Titor II says that he piloted one to other planets in search for new Earths because life on this planet is no longer guaranteed. That came about because the US government in the 1980s was concerned that global climate change could be a big threat to national security. Authorities wanted to find out what later in the 21st century Earth looked like. So John Titor says 1979 was the year he was assigned to time travel 71 years into Earth's future to 2050. What he says he encountered is, quote, hell on Earth, the title of his book's chapter 2. After this brief commercial break, John Titor II joins John Burroughs and me to detail what he encountered in Earth in the year 2050 and how that chaos related to another major Earth-changing event in January of 2018. That revelation led to an urgent mission to find other Earth-like planets that some humans could escape to, and how he came to be a time traveler for the United States Air Force in the first place. But right now, to begin, could you please describe in detail what the time travel process is and was like, and what you experienced when you entered the TR-3B at Area 51, Nevada in March of 1979, to go 71 years into Earth's future to 2050?
I initially was given flight training on the TR-3B, and I made many practice runs of short distances, and we didn't really discuss time travel until I had mastered the controls and could sit there with my co-pilot and take off and land, and then maneuver it to an altitude, and then go to a designated spot on the planet. And it is a technology unlike any other. The power plant's designed to do it. Going that fast, the most important thing is the navigational system. You want to make sure that you're not going to hit anything. Even if you hit something at whatever speed you're going at, it's going to present a problem for you. These spacecraft are lightly armored. The skins aren't that thick, so you could easily develop a problem, and that's the trick to it.
Well, when we were talking on Sunday, you were saying that when you are in the TRB, if I understand it, you're sitting in some kind of a chair or a console, correct? And that's where you put in these coordinates that computers then deal to get you going past the speed of light. And then how do you get to 2050?
Once you punch it into the navigational system and you pick the year, it does all that for you pretty much. You'll sit there and you will feel a hum. It doesn't really, it's not annoying or anything, but you'll feel the spacecraft hum, and any kind of lights that are on the outside of the spacecraft will become blurred. And when you reach the destination, if you're just going to a place on the Earth, if you were trying to make a quick trip to do reconnaissance in stealth mode over the South China Sea to look at islands that are being created by China, you could do it and they would never see you using stealth technology.
But we wouldn't travel at the speed of light around the other side of the Earth, would we?
You would travel pretty fast, but that speed of light, when it comes into play, is really when you're going to go to the moon, or you're going to go to Mars, and you lay in a coordinates. Now, if you're going to go to the future, you obtain an altitude 2-3 miles up, and you punch it in the computer, and that is a flight. And I will say that you do go light speed, and you're going fast enough to create a gravitational wave, and the computer figures out the rest of it for you.
And it is sort of like getting to a resonant point in space-time?
Yes, exactly. I would say that that's part of it. But the computers do almost all of that for you.
When you get to 2050,